The morning of Ava and Noah's graduation from Harborview Private School should have been one of those rare, crystal-clear days that live in your memory forever. You know the kind: sunlight slanting through the kitchen window, coffee steaming in the mug, that quiet anticipation before a major milestone. I'd pictured it for years. The proud walk from the car to the auditorium, the sound of my kids' names echoing over the loudspeakers, maybe even a candid photo afterward with all of us smiling like a Norman Rockwell painting. Instead, it started with a sound I'll never forget: the sharp thud of Brooke's clutch hitting the passenger seat floor as I braked a little harder than usual to let a cyclist pass. The bag tipped open, and a handful of contents spilled out in slow motion. Lipstick, compact mirror, sunglasses case, and then the two items that froze me. A hotel key card with the name of a coastal resort printed in elegant, metallic script, the kind of branding you notice because it's designed to make you think luxury and privacy at the same time. Next to it, a crumpled paper receipt, the ink faintly smudged but still clear enough to read. Late night check-in. Double occupancy. Felt like time slowed down. My right hand stayed on the wheel, but my left hovered over the clutch as if picking up that keycard would burn me. Brooke moved faster. She scooped the card up without hesitation, slid it back into the bag, and zipped the clutch shut in one smooth motion. Not a single flicker of embarrassment crossed her face. She might as well have dropped a grocery list. "God, this week's been insane," she said immediately, pressing her palm to her temple like she was warding off a migraine. Her voice had that bright, hurried tone she used when she wanted to redirect a conversation before it began. "The committee meeting last night went until midnight. You would not believe how picky Mrs. Callahan is about the seating chart." I didn't respond right away. My eyes stayed on the road, but my mind was 1,000 miles away, or maybe just a few miles out on the Oregon coast, in a room with 2 key cards and a view of the waves. "And then this morning," she continued, her laugh just a little too forced, "I realized Ava's sash was still at the dry cleaner, so I had to—" She broke off to rummage in her clutch, as though organizing lipsticks could erase the fact that she'd just stuffed a hotel key inside it. "Anyway, can you drop me at the entrance? I promised Mrs. Callahan I'd help with the programs before things start." I could have asked. Right there. Could have held up the receipt, asked who she'd been with, why the room was for 2. But I didn't. Maybe it was because I didn't want the day, the one my kids had worked for, to dissolve into a fight on the side of the road. Or maybe it was because part of me already knew the answer, and once you ask a question like that, there's no unknowing it. We pulled into the Harborview lot. Sunlight bounced off the hoods of luxury SUVs and gleaming sedans. Proud parents milled around, adjusting ties, straightening dresses, corralling grandparents. Brooke leaned over, kissed me quickly on the cheek. A precise, practiced motion, and stepped out. She was in a navy dress I'd never seen before, the kind with a perfect cut that looked like it cost more than my first car. "See you inside," she said, already walking briskly toward the side entrance. Inside the auditorium, the air was thick with perfume, aftershave, and the hum of polite conversation. Rows of parents settled into seats with programs in hand, the printed names of their children like trophies on paper. I took my place at the very back, not by choice, but because the reserved sections up front were for immediate family and special guests. According to the usher who glanced at my badge and guided me toward the standing room. From where I stood, I could see her. Brooke, front row, perfectly poised, sitting beside Derek. He was leaning in, saying something that made her laugh. Not the laugh she used at home, the small, tired one, but the open, luminous kind that seemed to light up her whole face. The ceremony began with the expected pomp, the headmaster's speech, the slideshow of awkward childhood photos, the obligatory jokes about the bright future ahead. Then the graduates took the stage one by one, each delivering their carefully rehearsed words of thanks. Ava went first. Her voice carried through the room, confident and clear. "I want to thank my mom for everything she's done for me, and my real father, Derek, for always being there." She glanced toward the front row, where Brooke's eyes shone and Derek beamed. Noah followed, his grin matching his sister's. "Same here," he said, earning a ripple of laughter from the audience. "Thanks to Mom, and to my real father, Derek. The applause was warm, sustained. People turned toward Derek with approving nods, a few patting him on the shoulder. Brooke's hands came together in perfect rhythm with the crowd, her smile steady and radiant. I clapped too, though my palms felt like blocks of wood. In that moment, I wasn't hearing the applause. I was hearing the faint click of a hotel door locking behind two people, the muffled rush of ocean wind outside a balcony, the sound of my own heartbeat in a room I wasn't supposed to be in. Somewhere in the Harborview parking lot, tucked inside the glove compartment of Brooke's car, that key card was still there, silent, flat, and heavier than anything I'd ever held. I used to tell myself marriages don't fall apart in a single night. They sag first, then split at the seam you kept pretending wasn't there. After Harborview, after the applause pinning Derek into our lives like a name tag, I started rewinding the year frame by frame, trying to spot the first loose thread. There wasn't one. There were dozens, tugged so slowly I mistook the unraveling for ordinary wear. Started with her phone. Brooke had never guarded it. She'd toss it to me to cue a playlist or confirm a dinner reservation while she folded towels. Then one gray afternoon in January, the screen lit up beside her and she flipped it face down like it had flashed a password to a bomb. No explanation, just a palm resting on the glass as if her hand could muffle the truth. After that, the habit arrived like sunrise, face down, silenced, do not disturb set so tight even calendar alerts came through like whispers. Calls moved to headphones. Her lips barely moved when she talked, a mime with secrets. The graduation committee meetings followed. She said it the way people say jury duty, like service, not choice. Meetings stretched past midnight. She'd drift in afterward with that high, bright energy you only get when the night gives you more than caffeine. She'd stand in the doorway and recite a monologue about trophies and donor plaques like she was reading from cue cards, eyes shining but unfocused, already somewhere else. I'd ask who was on the committee. She'd list a few names and then, almost as an afterthought, mention Derek, as if he were a table centerpiece, present but decorative. Then came the fitness studio, boutique spot on the waterfront, where eucalyptus towels and curated playlists make sweat feel like luxury. Stress, she said when I raised an eyebrow. You know how the committee is. Saturdays became detoxes. A word that apparently means you vanish after breakfast, reappear at 4 smelling like cucumber water, and talk about an instructor named Soul as if he's a veteran of several personal wars. He really pushes us, she'd say, and I'd nod like we were still talking about exercise. Passwords shifted the way seasons do. We'd always kept devices open because life is easier when you're not treating your living room like a spy movie. One night in March, her laptop asked for a password that didn't exist the day before. Brooke laughed and said IT had made everyone update. Later, when I tried to AirPlay a movie for the kids, the network name had changed to something cute and private. She texted me the new one, then deleted the thread, which is like handing someone a key and snatching it back before they've reached the door. Receipts began to show up in odd places, like breadcrumbs dropped by someone who swore she wasn't walking anywhere. A florist across town. A restaurant in a neighborhood we never visit. The kind with patio heaters, oysters, and candlelight flattering enough to make anyone look forgiven. Vendor took us, she said when I asked. Comped. In our house, the word vendor did more heavy lifting than I did. Her wedding ring left a ghost. Some weeks a pale groove appeared around her finger. A quiet ring-shaped absence you wouldn't notice unless you were looking straight at it. I mentioned it once. She said bar class made the ring pinch and rolled her eyes like I'd asked whether water was wet. For 3 days after, the ring starred in every photo she posted, glimmering on coffee mugs, glinting by steering wheels, like a public service announcement that only I was supposed to read. Her car developed a second life. I'm not the guy who logs odometer readings, but I know my routes. One Thursday I borrowed her SUV while mine was in the shop, and the digital range sat lower than it should have, the tank whispering it had burned miles on errands not shown on our calendar. Got lost on the way to the studio, she said when I asked. Brooks lived in Portland 15 years. Getting lost at this point would be a creative decision. Our family cloud, the little ecosystem I'd set up so we wouldn't lose birthday photos, turned into a rumor mill. Pictures disappeared. Not many, not obvious ones, just enough to make gaps that formed shapes if you stared long enough. The backup logs still held geotags. Waterfront, late evening, 3 blocks from that glass-toothed hotel we'd once passed and joked about. I asked why a picture from movie night was tagged by the river. She didn't blink. Location services are glitchy, she said, like she was reporting the weather. The kids noticed in the way kids do, sideways. Ava started asking if Mom would be home for dinner or with the committee. Noah slipped into Derek's slang after 2 short encounters at school events. Dialed, locked in, terms that dress up distance as focus. One evening he asked if Derek could help him with a video project because he knows cameras. I said I knew cameras too. Noah shrugged. Yeah, but he's like, really into it. I laughed out loud, then realized I was the only one in the room who thought that was funny. There were smaller things that wouldn't hold up in court but stacked nicely in the mind. New perfume? No, Brooke kept her scent steady, like a signature. But a different cologne drifted in some nights, warm and coastal cedar, salt, a little citrus. Marketing guy from the committee hugged me, she'd say, scrunching her nose like she hated it. Later I'd find the scarf folded carefully in a drawer where we never kept scarves, as though it belonged to someone who visited, not someone who lived here. Texts changed tone. She used to send me little nothing messages from the day, grainy coffee *TS, a dog she saw on a walk, a meme Ava sent her. Those dwindled. In their place, I got logistics, pickup times, grocery lists, a thumbs up reacting to a full paragraph I'd written about Noah's science fair. It wasn't silence. It was administration. We had a brief, brittle fight in February about nothing. A dish left in the sink, I think, and she went for a drive. When she came back, she smelled like rain and cinnamon gum. A combo I'd learn later lived in the lobby of that waterfront studio. She apologized quickly, efficiently, like she was reading the apology right off the teleprompter. I'm just stretched thin, she said. I believed her. I just had the wrong map of what was stretching her. Another night sticks with me. I was chopping onions for chili, the rain coming down sideways against the kitchen window, and Brooke walked in wearing a black dress I didn't recognize. Simple, sharp, the kind of black that swallows light. I joked about overdressing for name tags. She laughed, kissed my cheek, then reached for a paper towel and carefully blotted the lipstick she'd left on my skin. She studied the red dot like evidence, folded the towel once, twice, and slid it into her purse. The neatness of that gesture bothered me in a way I didn't have words for then. If you stack each moment on its own, maybe none of it weighs enough to crush anything. People set phones face down. Meetings run long. New gyms, new passwords, new routes. That's the trouble with patterns. They disguise themselves as life. At some point, though, ordinary choices begin to rhyme with the same dangerous word, and you hear a chorus you can't dismiss as the neighbor's radio. The moment that sealed it for me wasn't a photo or a kiss or a confession. It was a silence. She came home after midnight, barefoot, heels hooked over 2 fingers, the house dark. She eased the door shut and thought she was alone. I was in the hallway, waiting for the courage to say the things I kept shelving. Brooke closed her eyes and smiled. A small, private smile I'd never seen directed at me. Then she exhaled, smoothed her hair, and put the smile away like jewelry she couldn't risk wearing in the wrong crowd. People ask, if they're nosy enough, how I didn't know. They're not really asking about knowledge. They're asking how I lived alongside it. My answer is simple. I kept stacking the proof on a tidy little pile labeled later. Later after graduation. Later when work calmed down. Later when the house felt less like a stage set. Later grows teeth. It eats the days you thought you were saving. By the time that hotel key card slid from her clutch onto the seat beside me, the story had already been printed in small type across our calendar. I just hadn't learned to read it. After the ceremony, after Ava and Noah thanked their real father, and the room applauded like a verdict, I could finally translate. It wasn't a twist. It wasn't even a reveal. It was the plain meaning of months of ordinary moments, laid bare. I drove home from Harborview with the key card in my pocket. I told myself it was evidence, but it felt like a relic. The first sign, the last sign, same sign, finally legible. The coastline logo winked up from the plastic, and for the first time in months I stopped promising myself later. The night of the graduation, I drove us home in silence. Brooke scrolled her phone like she was reviewing tomorrow's weather, not like she just sat applauding another man in the front row, while our children publicly erased me from their narrative. At a red light, I caught her reflection in the window, calm, almost smug, as though the whole event had gone exactly to plan. I didn't bring up the hotel key card. Not yet. If I had, she would have nized the same tight-lipped denial she'd been perfecting for months. I didn't want denials. I wanted facts, cold, immutable, the kind that could sit in a folder without needing my commentary. After I dropped her off, I went back out. My excuse was gas for the morning. But really, I was stalling. I parked 2 blocks from the house, leaned back in the seat, and started working through the ways I could confirm what my gut had already decided was true. When I got in later, she was already in bed. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. That's when I remembered the smart lock. I'd installed it myself, 3 screws, a firmware update, and a link to my phone. We'd set it up so the kids could use temporary guest codes for babysitters, dog walkers, and delivery people. Every entry was logged, time-stamped. I sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through the log. Most entries were the usual Brooks code, mine, the kids. Then I saw it. The night before graduation, 12:04 a.m. A code I didn't recognize. Guest access. Duration. Active until 6 a.m. We hadn't scheduled any guests. I opened the archived doorbell camera footage. There it was, grainy in the low light, but clear enough to see Brooke standing at the doorway, barefoot, hair loose, wearing a hoodie I'd never seen before. She glanced over her shoulder once, then stepped aside to let Derek in. He didn't hesitate. No awkward handshake or polite nod. Just walked in like the place had been built for him. They hugged tight, like people who had been deprived of the others sent for too long. She pressed her face into his neck. He rested his hand on the small of her back. The recording had no audio, but I could read their body language fluently. I'd seen enough embraces in my life to know when one had the weight of rehearsed familiarity. This wasn't, "Hey, thanks for the ride." This was, "I've been thinking about this since the last time." I fast-forwarded. 39 minutes later, they emerged from the hallway. Brooke's hair was pulled back now. Derek adjusted his jacket. She walked him to the door, and they paused, one last hug, longer than the first. Then he stepped out into the night, and she stood in the doorway until his taillights faded, her arms folded against the cold or against the moment ending. The lock registered the door ceiling shut at 12:46 a.m. I should have stopped there. The footage alone was enough. But curiosity is a dangerous thing when you already know the answer. The next breadcrumb was in the receipts. I dug the hotel slip out of her glove compartment again, smoothing it against the counter under the light. The timestamp was the same night, check-in just before midnight. The resort's late check-in policy matched the time Derek had pulled up in my driveway. Her bank statement filled in the rest. A charge for parking at a downtown lot just after 11 p.m. Registered to her license plate via a parking app. That same app had a history tab she'd never bothered to clear. The entry listed the coastal hotel street as the destination. I pieced the evening together like a detective stringing red thread between photographs. She'd driven from our house to the waterfront, parked, met Derek. They'd gone inside the hotel long enough to make it worth the gas and the secrecy. Then, before sunrise, he was at our house, walking down my hallway like it was an extension of his. What had been suspicion was now a fixed point on the map. Coordinates I could hand to anyone without embellishment, and the story would tell itself. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, listening to her breathing beside me, wondering how much of it was the sleep of a guilty conscience and how much was the sheer confidence that I wouldn't do anything about it. I kept seeing the footage in my head. The way she stepped aside to let him in, how natural it looked, how much more comfortable she seemed with him in that doorway than she had with me in months. Around 4 in the morning, I gave up on the pretense of rest. I padded into the kitchen, opened my laptop, and started making copies. Screensh *TS of the lock log. Exports of the doorbell footage. PDFs of the bank statement and the parking record. The hotel receipt. Each file went into a folder I named with the date of the graduation, an arbitrary detail, but it felt right. Like I was marking the day the private story became a public one, even if the public was just me for now. I thought about confronting her then, sliding the laptop across the counter, asking her to narrate the footage for me. But that would have been for her benefit, not mine. She would have played the same hand. Denial, minimization, maybe even outrage at my snooping. I wasn't going to give her that script to read from. Instead, I closed the laptop and left the folder where only I could reach it. I wanted the knowledge to settle in, to change its temperature from boiling to cold steel. When dawn finally pulled itself over the horizon, Brooke emerged from the bedroom in her graduation committee sweatshirt, hair damp from a shower, smelling faintly of the lavender shampoo she always used after late nights out. She kissed my cheek in passing, the same automatic gesture she gave the kids before school. "Want coffee?" she asked. I said yes, though I barely tasted it. While she poured, I thought of Derek's hand on her back in the doorway, the hotel logo glinting in the camera's streetlight glare, the way she'd paused to watch his car disappear. She talked about the post-graduation brunch planned for next weekend, whether we'd need to reserve extra chairs. I nodded at the right moments, but my mind was already elsewhere. Mapping the path from confirmation to action, the quiet kind that leaves no room for rewrites. By the time she rinsed her cup and headed for the door, I had already decided. I wouldn't confront her in the kitchen, or the bedroom, or in the middle of another family event. I would build my own stage, one where the truth could stand on its own without her lighting crew. And I knew just where to start. When people think of betrayal, they imagine the explosion, the yelling, the slammed doors, the confrontation that rattles the walls. But the truth is, there's another way to respond, one that doesn't play into the cheater's story. It's quieter, colder. It moves in the background while they're still congratulating themselves on keeping the lie intact. By the afternoon after graduation, I knew exactly which way I was going to play it. The education fund had been my proudest piece of long-term planning. $200,000, built brick by brick over years of freelance contracts, overtime shifts, and every bonus I didn't touch. It wasn't glamorous, but it meant Ava and Noah would never have to choose between debt and their dreams. The account was joint in name only. Brooke never contributed a cent. I don't think she even remembered the login. It lived in a credit union she didn't use, the kind of place where they still send handwritten thank you cards when you open a CD. That fund was my fortress, until it hit me that a fortress is only useful if it's defending the right people. The image of Derek sitting in a campus bleacher, wearing my role like a tailored suit, was all I needed to decide. The money wouldn't go to the kids who had just stood on stage and declared him their real father. It would go to someone who would understand what it meant, someone who would treat it as a lifeline rather than an entitlement. That's how Maya came into the equation. Brooke's niece, technically, but I'd been more present in her life than half her blood relatives. Smart kid. Quiet. The kind of quiet that means you're paying attention, not that you're absent. She'd been accepted into veterinary school but was working night shifts at a grocery store to piece the tuition together. No safety net, no one covering the gaps. I made the first call before dinner. The credit union manager knew me by name, which sped things along. I explained that I wanted to transfer the full balance into a new trust account. Beneficiary, Maya. Purpose, tuition, housing, books, and an emergency fund. I could hear the click of keys on her end as she set it up, her voice calm and efficient. No curiosity about why the change was happening. I appreciated that. Within an hour, the paperwork was in my inbox. By the next morning, the transfer had cleared. The trust wasn't just a bank account. It was a shield. Legal documents stated exactly how the money could be used. I had it notarized, copies sent to my lawyer. If Brooke ever tried to challenge it during divorce proceedings, she'd find herself boxed out by airtight language and a timeline that proved the funds were mine to give. I didn't tell Maya right away. That conversation needed to happen face-to-face, without Brooke or anyone else nearby to warp the meaning. This wasn't about making a scene, it was about changing the current while the surface stayed calm. Brooke noticed something was different in the days that followed, but she misread it. My silence, my lack of questions, my refusal to pick fights. All of it looked to her like fatigue, maybe even surrender. She didn't realize that the board had shifted under her feet. In the evenings, she'd scroll through her phone on the couch, occasionally tossing out logistics, Noah's basketball schedule, Ava's request for new cleats. I'd nod, make a note on my calendar, and say nothing about the fact that the education fund she'd counted on was gone. I started moving other pieces too. The joint checking account, which I'd been feeding automatically from my paychecks, now saw only what was needed for the mortgage and shared bills. The rest went into an account in my name alone at a bank across town. Passwords changed. Authorizations revoked. There's a strange satisfaction in realizing that self-preservation doesn't require anyone else's permission. Brooke thought she was playing a long game, keeping me distracted while she lived her second life, but she'd underestimated how much planning I'd done for the life I thought we had. That same SK*LL set works just as well when you're dismantling it. By the end of the week, the financial ties between us were thin enough to cut clean with a single legal motion. When I finally sat down with Maya, it was at a corner table in a cafe 2 blocks from her apartment. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a way that told me she hadn't had time for herself in days. "You've been working too much," I said. She gave a half smile. "Vet school doesn't pay for itself." "It does now," I said, sliding the folder across the table. Inside were the trust documents, the balance statement, and a simple note I'd written in my own hand. "Because you've earned it." She flipped through the pages slowly, her brow furrowing. "I don't understand. This is everything." "It's yours," I said. "Use it for school, housing, emergencies, whatever it takes to make sure you get across the finish line without burning yourself out." Her eyes glassed over, and for a second I thought she might refuse out of pride. Instead, she closed the folder carefully and said, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I told her. "Just do the work. Graduate. Be the vet you've been aiming to be since you were 12. She nodded, and I could see her processing the shift, the way a single conversation can open a door that used to be a wall. On the walk back to my car, I felt lighter. The money was no longer a weight tied to a future I didn't believe in. It was already moving, already working for someone who would honor it. Back home, Brooke was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. She glanced over her shoulder when I came in. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said, hanging up my jacket. I didn't elaborate. We ate in near silence. She made a comment about the upcoming move-in dates for Ava and Noah. How at least we don't have to stress about deposits or fees. I just sipped my water and nodded, feeling the irony settle between us like a third-place setting. She still thought the fund was waiting for them. She still thought the stage she'd built, with Derek in the lead role, was going to pay out like a trust in a fairy tale. And I let her think that, because the thing about quiet moves is that they only work if the other person doesn't hear the clock ticking. By the time she realized the sound wasn't applause, it would already be too late. Move-in day at Riverton State University was supposed to be their next victory lap. Brooke had been talking about it for weeks, lining up matching comforters for Ava and Noah's dorm rooms, planning first-day photos for social media, even suggesting a brunch afterward with Derek and the kids, like it was the closing scene in a feel-good movie. I kept my distance from the planning. Let her handle the details, keep her momentum. She still thought the money was there, waiting to smooth over every cost. That morning, the driveway looked like a small parade. Ava's SUV was packed to the roof with labeled bins and overstuffed duffel bags. Noah had crammed his things into the back of Brooke's car. Gaming console carefully boxed, sneakers in their original packaging. Derek arrived in his glossy black pickup, the kind of truck that's spotless enough to suggest it's never carried anything dirtier than a golf bag. Brooke handed me a to-do list for the day as though I was part of the team. I glanced at it, then folded it in half and slid it into my pocket without comment. My role here was spectator, not participant. The campus was buzzing. Parents unloading, students in matching t-shirts directing traffic, dorm windows propped open to let in the last warm air before fall. We carried boxes up to the check-in desk, where a student worker in a yellow lanyard greeted Brooke with a practiced smile. "Hi. Name?" "Ava Taylor," Brooke said brightly. The student typed, frowned, typed again. I'm not seeing a housing assignment here." Brooke laughed lightly, the way people do when they're sure it's a minor clerical error. "Oh, there must be a mistake. Everything's been paid for, tuition, housing, meal plan. Check under Taylor Anderson, maybe." The student tried again, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, there's no payment recorded for housing or the deposit. Without that, we can't issue your keys." The brightness in Brooke's voice flickered. "No, that's impossible. The fund covers everything. It was set up years ago." I leaned against the wall, watching her recalibrate in real time. Derek stepped forward, smiling his public smile. "Hey, let's not stress. Maybe it's just a processing delay. We'll sort it out." The student printed a slip of paper. "You'll need to visit the bursar's office. They can confirm payments. Next." Brooke's heels clicked sharply on the tile as she marched toward the administrative building, Derek trailing behind with his easygoing stride. I followed at a distance, hands in my pockets, listening to the murmur of their voices growing more urgent. At the bursar's office, a clerk pulled up the accounts, her expression neutral. "There's no record of payment for housing or tuition this semester for either student." Brooke's voice tightened. "That's not possible. The education fund." The clerk shook her head gently. "If the funds were transferred recently, they didn't come here. You might want to check with your bank." Derek suggested a call on speaker so we can all be in the loop. Brooke ignored him, digging through her phone, scrolling fast. I could see her shoulders stiffen as she reached the bottom of her messages with me, where the last conversation about the fund had been months ago. "I'll take care of this," she said finally, turning to Ava and Noah, who had been standing in the doorway trying to look unfazed. "Why don't you go grab a coffee while we sort it out?" But the kids had heard enough to know the day wasn't going the way Brooke had promised. Ava frowned. "Wait, so we don't have rooms?" "It's just a glitch," Derek jumped in, his tone a little too confident. "Don't worry, we'll have you moved in by tonight." The clerk glanced at the clock, then at them. "We close at 4. Payments have to clear before keys can be issued. If that doesn't happen today, you'll need to arrange temporary housing." Brooke smiled tightly, the kind of smile that hides its teeth. "We'll make the payment now." She pulled out her card, only to have the clerk inform her that deposits had to be made via certified check or wire transfer. A flush crept up Brooke's neck. She looked at Derek, who shifted uncomfortably. "I don't have my checkbook," he said. The reality settled in like fog, thick, damp, inescapable. Ava crossed her arms. "So we're not moving in today." Brooke's voice went soft, almost pleading. "It's just a small delay." Noah looked from her to Derek, his mouth tightening. "What about the fund? You've been saying for years we wouldn't have to worry about this." I stayed silent in the corner, letting the scene play out. By late afternoon, the move-in volunteers were gone. The dorm parking lot was emptying. Ava and Noah's cars still sat where we'd left them, full of their boxed-up lives. Brooke had made 3 trips between offices, each time coming back with the same brittle expression. Derek's enthusiasm had dulled to occasional platitudes about things working out. When the sun dipped low enough to cast the quad in shadow, Ava slammed her car door shut. "This is ridiculous. I'm going home." Noah followed, muttering something under his breath about how real fathers should probably know how to pay for a dorm room. Brooke turned toward me for the first time all day. "Do you know anything about this?" I met her gaze evenly. "About what?" She hesitated, searching my face for a tell. I gave her nothing. On the drive back, Derek suggested they look at it as an adventure. Ava didn't answer. Noah put in earbuds and stared out the window. Brooke kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, her grip on the steering wheel tightening every time our eyes met. When we pulled into the driveway, the group scattered. Ava to her room, Noah to the garage to shoot baskets. Derek lingered by his truck, offering Brooke a half hug before leaving. In the kitchen, she finally dropped the calm. What did you do? I shrugged. Seems like a question for your bank. Her eyes narrowed. That money was for the kids. That money was mine, I said evenly. I just changed the beneficiary. She stared at me, and for once, she didn't have a rehearsed line ready. Upstairs, I could hear Ava pacing, Noah's basketball hitting the pavement. Their future had shifted in a single day, and the performance they'd staged at graduation suddenly felt like a scene from a script that had been canceled mid-season. By nightfall, Brooke had called her sister twice, Derek once, and left a message for the bank. I sat on the porch, listening to her voice carry through the open windows, equal parts fury and disbelief, while the air cooled and the first crickets started up. It struck me then. This was the exact moment I'd been working toward. Not revenge, not spectacle, just the quiet collapse of a plan built on the assumption that